Hello, I'm Stephan Pollard, and I'm a journalist. I'm editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and I also have CLL. And I've been asked to talk a bit about my CLL journey, as it were. So why don't I go back right to the beginning? I was diagnosed around about 6 years ago by a fluke. Really, I had no idea anything was wrong with me. I had a shoulder operation, a very bog standard operation to do with calcium in my shoulder, and I had some blood tests done at the time. And my GP, who was absolutely brilliant, spotted that there was something a bit amiss about the blood tests. And she said she'd like to send me to a hematologist the next day. Being a bit of an idiot, for some reason, it never crossed my mind that when your GP says they're going to send you to a cancer specialist the next day, that they might actually diagnose you with cancer. It sounds idiotic now when I look back at it, but I never thought I just thought, oh, she just wants to send me to another doctor. And I was sent to see this hematologist who had the worst bedside manner of any doctor I've ever seen, either fictionally or in reality. It was truly astonishing. I walked into the room. She, at no point did her eyes rise from the desk where she was looking at her notes. She said, "Could you sit down?" And I said, "Are you Stephan Pollard?" "Yes, I'm Stephan Pollard." She said, "Well," and then she started talking in a monotonous whisper almost, and I caught the words leukemia. And she then carried on, and I said, "Sorry, could you just wait a second? Did you just say leukemia?" And she said, "Yes," and then carried on. And I said, "Sorry, I just need to go over this again." And anyway, this sort of farce went on for a few minutes while she wouldn't actually explain what she meant. And I thought, when you said leukemia, do you mean cancer? And she went, "Yes, that is a form of cancer." Anyway, she then sent me for a biopsy, and well, I went out into the car after this initial diagnosis, and it hadn't really dawned on me. I still hadn't quite computed what she'd said because her manner was so bizarre. And it was only when I sat down in the car that I suddenly realised what was going on. And as I say, she sent me for a biopsy the next day, and luckily moved me to another consultant from then on, who I've been with ever since, who is about as far removed from her as it's possible to be, who's absolutely wonderful. I'm being treated at UCLH at the Macmillan Cancer Centre, and under Dr. Ardeshna, who is just simply fabulous. Anyway, I was on watch and wait for quite a few years. I should say, going back a bit to the diagnosis, I'm now 56, and I've got two young kids. My oldest daughter is 10, and I assumed that the fact that I was continually exhausted and tired was simply because I was in my mid-40s with a young baby, as she then was, and a son as well, who followed 2 years later. It never crossed my mind that there was anything medical about it. So with hindsight, of course, a lot falls into place. But at the time, it was simply the fact that the GP happened to spot this with my blood tests that led to me going to the hematologist, who did incidentally say that I was incredibly lucky, because she said most hematologists wouldn't spot what was wrong, let alone GPs. So thank God for that. Anyway, so I was transferred to UCLH, where I've been ever since, and I was on watch and wait for what was that, 4 or 5 years, and obviously I'm sure this is the same for most patients. You having been when you are diagnosed, you have zero knowledge of blood tests and what the readings amount to, but as soon as they start, you suddenly become quite an expert in it. So I could see over the course of I started going on ibrutinib last January 2020, But I could see in the sort of 6 months or so from June or so 2019, I could see the pattern of my blood tests that they weren't going that well. Having been stable, more or less stable for a few years, they were starting to get worse. So it's not as if it came as any great surprise to me when in January my consultant said, we need to start treatment. And in fact, we discussed in sort of November, December, whether the fact that treatment may become likely quite soon. I'm in a very fortunate position in that I have private medical insurance, and my insurer is willing to pay for ibrutinib as a first-line treatment. I'm incredibly lucky, and I constantly remember that when I open my drawer every night to take my pill. I just be thankful for how lucky I am that I have ibrutinib, because it's been close to miraculous for me. In that, from pretty much the moment I started taking it, the blood counts have gone exactly where they should go. Dr. Ardeshna says, I'm about as classic a case of the benefits of ibrutinib as it's possible to find. I have some hiccups along the way. I do suffer some side effects, which are, they're not great, but compared to the possible downside of not having ibrutinib, I'm willing to put them up. Specifically, I get really quite severe muscular pains in my wrists and in my ankles, and they come on entirely randomly. It took me, at first it was a bit worrying, but I'm now so used to them. I mean, this has been going on for such a long time now, since I've been on ibrutinib, that I'm quite used to it. And I know they always follow the same pattern, which is 2 or 3 days of pain, and then they ease up. And there's various, I put on hot patches and that kind of stuff, and it helps. I had a particularly bad time last summer when the pain got so bad I had to be admitted. I was in for about 3 weeks. It turned out to be it was knee pain. They're still not sure whether it was actually the ibrutinib which was the cause, or whether it was something else. But the probability, it probably was the same thing. So that's my journey, as it were. I sort of remain constantly surprised in a way that I have cancer, because it doesn't feel like I do. I feel completely normal in most respects. Before I was diagnosed, my dad had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and he was ill for 15 years or so, and he looked ill. He had chemo, and it was a big battle, and it dominated our lives for many years. And I don't feel like I'm in that league, as it were. I don't feel I'm in the same category as he was. Until, of course, lockdown happened, because lockdown forces you to, and shielding forced us all, I think, to reconsider, to realise just how vulnerable we are. I found last year was a very odd year. Well, it was a pretty odd year for everyone. I found it very odd. I was basically shielding in the spare room, which I stuck to rigidly. I was pretty good at it. And I managed to get through the shielding. It was, without going into too much detail, it was a bit odd, because I was also getting divorced at the same time. And I was at home with my soon-to-be ex-wife in a bedroom, dependent on her for pretty much everything. So it was a bit, how can I put it, strained. But we got through it, thanks in very large measure to her. I moved in November, when they allowed, house moves were allowed. I moved in November. I'm now in a flat on my own. I have to say, this lockdown has been the most challenging, but also the most uplifting at the same time, in a way. Challenging, I think everyone's found this third lockdown to be the most difficult of all, because it's just so unrelenting. I found it like that. I'm now properly on my own. I'm not allowed to see the kids. My consultant. The first thing I did when the lockdown was announced, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was I rang the team to say, and they reintroduced shielding. Does shielding mean shielding like it was last time? And they said it means more severe than last time, really, because this is so virulent. You really don't want to take any chances at all. So I've not been seeing my kids. They've not been coming into the house. And thank God for FaceTime is all I can say. But for all the strain and the pressures of that, and nothing compares really, as far as I'm concerned, to not being able to touch or cuddle my children. It's uplifting, isn't it? Also, because you know that there's an end to it. Uplifting is probably the wrong word. It's bearable, because there's an end to it thanks to the vaccine. Now I realise there's all kinds of debates, as it were, as to just how effective the vaccine will be for those of us with suppressed immune systems. But it's, I think even from what I've read, and I may be wrong, even on the worst case scenario, it will nonetheless have a big impact on us and stop some of the worst problems with COVID affecting us. So it has been bearable. I think if there was no vaccine, I mean, this is nothing to do with the fact that we've got CLL. I think this is probably true for everybody in the country. If there was no vaccine, it would be pretty unbearable, even more unbearable. I find I'm in a much better place in terms of mental health now, simply because I know that for all the sort of monotony of life as it is at the moment, things will lift at some point. I also have to say I'm eternally grateful that I have a job that I can do relatively easily from home. You wouldn't have thought, or at least I wouldn't have thought, that it was possible to edit a national newspaper sitting in your study with a computer. It actually is, and it's changed the way we will work forever once things get back to some kind of normality. But I find it, thank God I have work to focus on, and I that's made life a lot easier. I hope what I've said is of some use, simply because I think there's nothing that exceptional about what I'm going through. I'm a bog standard CLL sufferer with nothing particularly interesting to say or different. But I think in a way, the fact that I am so normal may be hopefully useful to other people, because we're all in the same boat, and we all, some of us are just getting on with it, and things are as they are. I hope that's been useful. Thank you.